Nope, but don't worry, I'll tell you why. So up until recently, I had a terrible misconception about the Electoral College. And the thing is this. It's okay to admit that you were ignorant about something. Ignorance is fine. The issue is staying ignorant. So when somebody schooled me, I appreciate it. My ignorance about the Electoral College was based on the idea that the Electoral College was something you invoked. For example, if there was an issue with the election and a state was having problems counting or whatnot, the Electoral College would show up and they would fix things. That's not the case. Ever since the late 1700s, there was a convention and they decided on electors. The Electoral College wasn't labeled the Electoral College until later on, but we had electors, and it was the electors that voted for president, right? Since that point. It has never been a popular vote. It has never been the actual citizens that vote, which is kind of funny. It's the electors. The reason I worded that way is because, and we'll get to it in a bit, is the idea of faithless electors. So before the electors, this was the thought processes of our founding fathers. For example, one of the History.com's articles about the Electoral College, it says, one group of delegates felt strongly that Congress shouldn't have anything to do with picking the president. Too much opportunity for chummy corruption between the executive and legislative branches. Another camp was dead set against letting the people elect the president by a straight popular vote. First, they thought the 18th century voters lacked the resources to be fully informed about the candidates, especially in rural outposts. Second, they feared a headstrong democratic mob steering the country astray. And third, a populist president appealing directly to the people could command dangerous amounts of power. Out of those drawn-out debates came a compromise based on the idea of electoral intermediaries. These intermediaries wouldn't be picked by Congress or elected by the people. Instead, the states would each appoint independent electors who would cast the actual ballots for the presidency. There's also a blemish in our national history that made having electors and the Electoral College kind of a popular thing. Can you guess what it was? Can you guess what it was? Slavery. But determining exactly how many electors to assign each state was another sticking point. Here the divide was between slave-owning and non-slave-owning states. It was the same issue that plagued the distribution of seats in the House of Representatives. Should or shouldn't the founders include slaves in counting a state's population? In 1787, roughly 40% of people living in the southern states were black slaves who couldn't vote. James Madison from Virginia, where slaves accounted for 60% of the population, knew that either a direct presidential election or one with electors divvied up according to free white residents only wouldn't fly in the South. The right of suffrage was much more diffusive in the northern than in the southern states, said Madison, and the latter could have no influence in the election on the score of Negroes. The result was a controversial 3/5 compromise in which black slaves could be counted as 3/5 of a person for the purpose of allocating representatives and electors and calculating federal taxes. The compromise ensured that southern states would ratify the Constitution and gave Virginia, home to more than 200,000 slaves, a quarter of the total electoral votes required to win the presidency. And for those making an argument that the Electoral College can't be changed, the issue there is that it has already changed. When it was created, a lot of the reasons it was created didn't pan out. Not only was the creation of the Electoral College in part a political workaround for the persistence of slavery in the United States, but almost none of the Founding Fathers' assumptions about the electoral system proved true. For starters, there were no political parties in 1787. The drafters of the Constitution assumed that electors would vote according to their individual discretion. not the dictates of a state or a national party. Today, most electors are bound to vote for their party's candidate. And even more important, the Constitution says nothing about how the state should allot their electoral votes. The assumption was that each elector's vote would be counted. But over time, all but 2 states, Maine and Nebraska, passed laws to give all of their electoral votes to the candidate who wins the state's popular vote count. Any semblance of elector independence has been fully wiped out. So, the Electoral College came into being as if it were a defense against the dark arts in Hogwarts. But the thing is, it hasn't always been legit. For example, to date, there have been a total of 165 faithless electors. These are individuals who put their vote not towards who they represented, right? But towards who they felt was better deserving, in their opinion, of the presidency. So this idea where the Electoral College is some sort of defense against the very thing that it has already been doing, the very thing that the Constitution technically allows the electors to do, is off. Now, recently in 2020, this year, the Supreme Court has actually put their foot down on the whole thing regarding faithless electors and made it legal for states to basically disregard their votes, to fine them, to basically ensure that the voice of the people is heard. But a couple things there that we need to talk about. Later in the same article, it says, Kagan's opinion noted that the original electoral college system created by the framers of the Constitution failed to anticipate the growth of political parties. By 1769, the first contested election after George Washington's retirement, the system exploded in disarray, with 2 consecutive electoral college fiascos. That led to the passage of the 12th Amendment in 1804, facilitating the Electoral College as a mechanism not for deliberation but for party-line voting, Kagan wrote. Nothing in the Constitution prevents the states from taking away presidential electors' voting discretion, she said. For centuries, almost all electors have considered themselves bound to vote for the winner of the state popular vote. If the framers of the Constitution had a different idea, she said, they never committed it to printed page. My biggest problem with the Electoral College is that for the vast majority of all elections, around 91%, the Electoral College and the popular vote have gone hand to hand to pick the presidency. Only in 5 cases in American history was that not the situation, and about 3 of those were in the 1800s. And then it was 2000 with Bush and 2016 with President Trump. Where's the danger? Where has there ever been an issue? I got an opinion about that, but that'll be in another video regarding the 2016 election. But you know what? Let's review these 5 presidents and let us talk about when the Electoral College defended us against tyranny. Now this comes from the History.com article regarding the 5 presidents who didn't win the popular vote. Our first candidate, John Quincy Adams, 1824. Now Andrew Jackson had won most of the popular votes in the Electoral College in that one, but he needed the majority, which he didn't get. Eventually the vote went to the House of Representatives, who ended up putting Adams as POTUS, even though Jackson had beaten Adams by 99 electoral votes to 84. Next is Rutherford B. Hayes. Similar to 1824, the election of 1876 wasn't decided by voters but by Congress. Tilden won 184 electoral votes, exactly 1 vote shy from the majority needed at the time to win the presidency. Hayes only won 165, but 20 more electoral votes were still in dispute. In this case, Congress created a bipartisan Federal Electoral Commission composed of House Representatives, Senators, and Supreme Court Justices. The commission voted to give all 20 disputed electoral votes to Hayes, who won the election by the thinnest of margins, 185 to 184. Why did the commission decide to hand the election to Hayes, who had lost both the popular and the electoral vote? Most historians believe there was a deal brokered between the two parties. The Democrats, whose stronghold was the South, agreed to let Hayes be president in return for the Republican promising to pull all federal troops from former Confederate states. That's one of the main reasons why Reconstruction was abandoned in 1877. Next we have Benjamin Harris, 1888. In this situation, both parties accused the other of paying citizens to vote for their candidate. So-called floaters were voters with no party loyalty who could be sold to the highest bidder. In Indiana, a letter surfaced that allegedly showed Republicans plotting to buy up voters and to disrupt the opponent's own bribery efforts. Meanwhile, Southern Democrats did everything in their power to suppress the black vote, most of whom aligned with the Republicans, the party of Lincoln. Now here's the part that bugs me out about that one, right? Supposed to be there to defend us, right? The Electoral College, defense against the dark arts. And in this situation, Grover Cleveland was the darkness, he who should not be named. But right after Benjamin Harris got elected, he became president again. He won the election after that, and where's the defense in this situation? What did the Electoral College stop? Nothing. Because 4 years later, Cleveland came back and beat Harris, becoming the first and only U.S. president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. So those were the 1800 elections. Now let's talk about the more recent ones. The last 2 times that the president didn't win the popular vote. That is Bush in 2000, where the votes were so close in Florida that they needed a recount. In fact, Gore went to the Florida Supreme Court and they granted him the recount, only for Bush to go to the U.S. Supreme Court to overrule the recount. And he became president. Where's the defense there with the Electoral College? I don't quite see it. I mean, what would be the damage of one recount to make sure that the votes were right? But who cares what the people think, right? The hell with their voices. Lastly, we have Donald Trump with Hillary Clinton. Now, the only reason that kind of makes sense for the Electoral College in that one is, and I have to say this because it's a matter of principle, the DNC screwed up and screwed over the Democrats. If you're a Democrat, the DNC screwed you over last election. With all those emails and stuff that came out, basically saying that the DNC pre-selected Hillary Clinton above everybody else, you guys shot yourself in the foot. As a matter of fact, I would argue if they did it fair and square, right, that Hillary would have won. Now here's the thing. I think we have grown enough as a nation that we don't need the Electoral College. I can understand why it was needed in the past, for the good reasons at least, not slavery. But the idea of protecting the people who couldn't be familiar with the candidate, sure, why not? But at this point in our country's history, if we're incapable of keeping some tyrannical dictator from assuming the presidency, if we can't defend our fellow citizens from somebody abusing their power, then we've already failed as a nation, and it's somebody else's turn to carry the torch. Because here's the thing. When people say that America is great, we're not great just because we're great. We're great because we're a melting pot of people, of cultures. We are a prototype for what the future of the world is going to be, because the natural evolution of our planet is to be a one one world people, one tribe. And America is the prototype for that. Now, I think we're screwing up. Hope we can get things fixed. But until then, Electoral college is trash. And I'll leave it at that. Here's a message from your national idiot. Be safe. But before I leave, this is what my shirt looks like, in case y'all were wondering. Take care.